Hey everyone, welcome to Stripe Dev Live, where we talk about, I'm sorry, that's the wrong show. Hi everybody, welcome to Stripe Dev Chats. My name is Cecil Phillip, and I'm joined with my partner, Charles. We're developer advocates at Stripe, and we're gonna be talking to our friend Jesse here about all the cool things that we can do with Hasura, with GraphQL, and hopefully a little bit of Stripe too. So before we get started, first, why don't we have Jesse, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell folks who you are and what exactly that you do.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Jesse, and I am developer advocate at Hasura, where I work on our community outreach. So when you have things that you would like to see within the Hasura product, you can reach out to me and let me know, and I will pass those on to the right people. But basically, I'm a developer, former agency person, just working my way through this whole tech developer experience. So that's who I am, and hopefully today we'll get some cool synergy going between Hasura and Stripe.
Awesome. And Charles, I know you've played with Hasura a little bit before, right? Haven't you? Like you've tinkered with it a little bit?
Yeah, I did a guest appearance not too long ago on the Hasura Data and API show. Had a blast. It was my first time figuring out GraphQL, and
Nice.
Hasura got me up and running in 60 minutes, 60 seconds, something crazy.
You serious?
I'm serious. Like you go to their dashboard and you can deploy a hosted version. You can use Docker if you want to do it locally. It's nuts.
All right. So Jesse, if we don't get started in 60 seconds, we're gonna make a bet. You're gonna owe me some money or something, right? So we gotta 60 seconds or less. We're gonna make this happen, right? Is it on?
Well, we got some parameters, so I can get you running with GraphQL in 60 seconds.
Okay.
60 seconds is a bit tight, but because I was going to use the local hosted version with a bleeding edge of the Hasura product, which will take a little bit more time to set up. But
okay,
yeah. But Hasura Cloud, I've got videos that have getting started with Hasura in less than 5 minutes at least. So that's still cool.
Okay, so I won't put you on the hook for 60 seconds. And you know what? It's probably better we take our time and explain to folks what's happening, what are we doing. Let us know about all the knobs and switches and things that we have to turn. So you know what? I'll let you off the hook. We don't have to do that. But before we jump into talking about Hasura and all the cool things that you guys do, first, I want to go through some community highlights because I feel like since we were here the last time, which was 2 weeks ago, a whole bunch of stuff has happened. Content has been released. Tons of announcements have been made. And so I want to talk to the community a little bit and kind of share just some of the cool stuff that's happened. So I'm going to put on my screen really quickly. And let's kind of talk about some of the cool things that have been put out. Now, first of all, Charles, who's right here with us, he wrote a really cool blog post on Dev2 called Making Sense of Stripe Checkout, Payment Links, and the Payment Element. And this is really cool because now you kind of get to walk through all of these different options in terms of integrating payments inside of your app. And he does a really great job explaining which ones do we use, when do we use it when, and how do they kind of work. So if you're interested in learning about some of these different options, definitely head over to Dev2. It's in the Stripe organization. I think that's what they call them in Dev2. They're like organizations or groups or what have you. Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of read this article and kind of learn what some of these things are about. The next one I want to share, tomorrow, Stripe Dev Live. See, that's why I said Stripe Dev Live, because it was on my brain from earlier. Charles is going to be giving an interview with
Joff Tiquez and Darren Jennings.
Oh, so there's two people. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you're all going to be talking about Vue Stripe, right? Which I'm guessing is a way that you can integrate Vue.js and Stripe together. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Vue Stripe. We're going to be talking about the Vue ecosystem. We're going to just be having a chat about Vue because Vue's been doing a lot of interesting things. They migrated from Vue 2 to Vue 3 earlier this month. So we're going to be catching up on that stuff.
That's awesome. And so if folks want to be involved, how do I get into this, right? Do I just click on this little link and it'll take me to Discord? And then I can just join the Discord channel and listen into the conversation?
That's exactly right. Just hop into Discord, sign up for Discord so you can leave a question or make a comment.
Awesome. And that's tomorrow, right? So that's February 24th at 9 p.m. Pacific time. So if folks are up, then definitely make sure you go ahead and check that out. Next cool thing that happened, if folks are familiar with Deno, I think about Deno as Node with TypeScript, right? It's a JavaScript runtime. And I think you write your code in TypeScript and it runs server side, which is really cool. Well, not only do we have Stripe samples for Node, we actually have them now for Deno, which I think is amazing. So if folks are using Deno and you want to learn how to integrate with Stripe, head over to our Stripe samples GitHub repo, and you could check out the samples that we have. And as always, we're always looking for issues. Send us pull requests, anything that you think that can help make it better, or scenarios that we're not covering that you'd like to see. Definitely let us know over on our Stripe samples GitHub organization. And the last thing I want to share with folks, so our friends at Snyk, SNYK, I believe these folks do like security scanning for containers and developer environments in general. They're having an event. It's actually already started. It's called the Big Fix. But tomorrow, our teammate Paul is going to be on. He's going to be talking about like some of the security concerns you should have as you're building payments inside of your application. So definitely go ahead and check it out. You can head over to SNYK, over to Snyk, look up the Big Fix. And again, you can join Paul tomorrow, and tons of other developers and some of their own developer advocates as they're building and doing a lot of cool stuff around security. Now, that's it for me. I'm going to share these links inside of the chat. So if you're following us on YouTube, and I know some of y'all are looking at us on Twitter, I'll make sure that we have these links available for everyone. But until then, now I'm going to switch off my screen because I like to say this is no longer the social show. This is Jesse's show now. So I'm going to give him like full center stage. And let's start talking about like Hasura. And why don't we start off with like what is it exactly? Like how would you give me like the 2-minute pitch? What is Hasura? Like why should I use it?
Yeah. Can I do this in 2 minutes?
So it's not 60 seconds, man. I gave you a bump.
Not 60 seconds, yeah. Hasura is a very unusual product that controls your data layer, if you will. So at its fundamental core set, like the feature promise, I think it's probably easier to say the feature promise that it delivers, and then you kind of figure out where you want to put that in your stack. Mm-hmm. So the feature promise it delivers is it gives you an instant GraphQL API on your database. Okay. We started off with Postgres. Now we have support for SQL Server. We have support for BigQuery, some other database and sources coming along. But you give it a database, and then you are able to get an instant GraphQL, relationships across all your tables, and extremely powerful granular access controls to those tables. And now if you've been in the GraphQL space specifically, you know that there's some difficult paradigms to solve for: access control, caching, those kind of features. And Hasura just gives that to you out of the box. And on top of that, it lets you do things like creating actions. So sort of like imagine those kind of like resolvers that live at external endpoints. They give you database events, so you can do event-driven paradigms. You get subscriptions out of the box. So it really is it's a centralized server state platform that gives you this API, access control, event orchestration, and all these functionalities that help you build modern applications in one place. It's an open source product, so if you're more into open source and you don't want to have a hosted version of it, that's totally fine. We'll be actually using the open source version today, but it's also got a cloud version. It has flows from open source to cloud, so you can do CI/CD things. It's hard to say exactly where that fits into the official product title area, but I say the best way we've called it so far is the data layer orchestration. Is kind of the terms that get thrown around in, but it's really sort of a new way to put all the pieces together in one place that allow you to really have that access layer that sits between all your front ends, all your applications, and be able to control that in one spot.
Okay, so here's my question. So we have Hasura, right? Hasura exposes a GraphQL endpoint, right? So I have a web thing that I could call, I could request to get data and do mutations and those types of things. And Hasura connects directly to my database, right? So I go from database to API. I know sometimes in the middle, people want to do additional validation. I have business rules I want to run, maybe code I want to, kick off events and workflows and things of that nature, like business logic that needs to get injected in.
Yep.
How do I put that in Hasura? Like, is there Hasura serverless functions, or are there, events?
Yeah, so that would be our actions, right? So It's where if you wanted to say, okay, in this case, I need to take a special function that will now reach back into Hasura, pull out the aggregate of all of my products or whatever, and I get the, I don't know, average size I have or whatever. You could make an action for that would reach out to a function that's hosted somewhere. And then that would actually be able to pull the data back from Hasura, process it, return it back to the database. Or if you wanted it to be an event trigger, I could say, okay, I'm making a new order. And then that itself could actually trigger off like a behavior at something like Stripe or wherever else, and then write data back in. Like you have webhook support in Stripe, which is great. So you could have something like create an order in Hasura that kicks over an actual Stripe order. And then when that's done, processing, it actually fires back to Hasura. And in the meantime, I've got a subscription on that table that actually would update real time with the order being fulfilled or processed. Yeah,
That's cool. I really like that. Okay.
Yeah. What these subscriptions? What exactly is the subscriptions? Is it like a WebSocket type of situation, or?
It's WebSocket for now. So it's not. It doesn't have to be WebSockets. It's just that has been up until I think like 3 weeks ago the only technology that actually worked for real time. I think it was the Google team, and I'm really sorry if it wasn't, and somebody else just got like their credit stolen. There was just a recent spec that got pushed for a alternative to WebSockets. I just saw over on the Hacker News flybys. So there's something else that's in the works to try to replace WebSockets or compete with it. And I forget what it is, but so there may be an alternative coming soon. It might be riding on the back of the HTTP 2 spec or something, but I'm not quite sure what's supposed to be happening there. But yeah, so WebSockets for now.
Okay. Well, why don't we switch over to your screen and why don't we look at some demos? Like, I'd love to know what it actually feels like to get started and like what that developer flow looks like.
Yeah. So we're gonna start nerdy. So I'm gonna show you when I talked about actions. So historically in Hasura, and I'd love to hear in chat too if the people who are actually using Hasura maybe have used it before. That'd be cool to see. But when we talked about actions historically, these were functions that would resolve somewhere else and do complex business processing. Well, what we have now is we've actually used the same functionality for what we just now refer to generically as REST connectors, where we're able to essentially point an action directly at an existing REST endpoint, which keyword here, this is going to be interesting for Stripe. We can point it straight to a REST endpoint, and then be able to resolve data from our existing endpoint straight back to our GraphQL API without having to write any boilerplate code or any resolver code in the middle. Now, this is bleeding edge of the Hasura product. So we're going to be using the open source version. It's actually one of our development PRs. This will be out within the next month. We do fairly regular releases, so I think it's not the next one, but the one after where this will land. But don't quote me on that, otherwise the product team will come after me, and we don't want that. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move into a directory here for the Stripe live demo, and I'm just going to start totally from scratch. So this is kind of the CLI approach with Hasura to get a product up and running locally. I'm going to use one alias that I have because I use this a lot, called haspose, and I'll just tell you what it does. It downloads a Docker Compose file that has everything pre-configured. So there's really nothing fancy to it, and we'll have a quick look at it here. And it is literally just a Docker Compose file. If you've never seen one before, it's YAML, which I love YAML personally. And this is just a way for us to be able to define environments, a database, and the actual image that will be running the Hasura software itself. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over here. I'm going to swap out the environment or the image here with the pre-release version. Right now, somebody who's like a Vim expert is just crying on themselves over their beer because I am not that person. But I hope you'll forgive me for not being there. I'm just going to copy the string that I need for the image because bleeding edge Docker builds are fun with their naming structures.
Yeah, they're hard. I get it.
So we're going to go ahead and just use that. We're going to go ahead and write this out, and then we're going to go ahead and exit this. And with that, what we should get is a ready to go Docker image or a Docker Compose file that we can go ahead and boot up. So
one of the things I like about you using this approach, because when I first started looking around, because as a good host, I like to do research on the people that are coming on the show. I got the impression just from my personal research that Hasura, am I saying it right, by the way? Hasura is Hasura. How do you say it?
Hasura, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I say it wrong too compared to the way that the founders say it, but
Hasura. Yeah. Okay. So I had the impression that it was like a cloud-based product, right? And then I did a little digging and I was like, oh, okay, I can run it locally. So I love the fact that you're showing this demo running on my machine. So that means that I can have that developer flow where I'm not connected to outer space and I'm on my machine. But then when I'm ready to go to production or I'm ready to do something that actually scales a little bit more, I could push it to the cloud, push it to one of your hosted services. And now I could be up and running, but the experience should probably be about the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's everything that you see today, well, apart from the beta feature, is in cloud right away. And it's something that you'll even get a couple of additional features. So the caching, the observability dashboard, we can have a look at the end of the show if we've got enough time. So there's better features or additional features that are around production stacks that you would like to have with GraphQL that we've added, but they're server dependent. So that's why they're kind of dependent on it being a cloud environment and not something that's available for the open source, like caching, for example. It's something that you kind of have to control the server a lot more.
Got it.
I've got this container running in the background. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the Hasura CLI to init a metadata directory. And what this does is it actually creates just this very simple directory for me. I'm going to just leave it with the name Hasura. So now you'll see that what I've got is a Hasura directory and then the Docker Compose file. And I will go inside of the Hasura directory. And if we just do a quick, I want to reset this page here so we can kind of see it a bit nicer. If we just have a look inside of this directory, we'll see that there's a couple of folders, metadata, migrations, seeds, and config. This is all stuff that you get out of the box with the Hasura CLI. So what I'm going to do in this step here, I'm going to say Hasura console. And what that does is it boots up a version of the Hasura console that I'll need to be able to actually access my be able to track any migrations. Now, I've just remembered that I've forgotten one more important piece that I'm going to paste into my Docker Compose file. Because this is running a non-released version of our Docker image, I have to add one special piece for the front end here. So bear with me for this extremely engaging bit of television while I just remember which key it was that I had to add. That's the one right there. So we're going to head back over here. I'm going to actually just go ahead and boot this up into a code editor so we have a bit more context. Actually, I'm going to boot this up into the root directory. So we'll just pull this up in VS Code here.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit easier to kind of keep a mental place of what we're doing here. So inside of this Docker Compose file, I just need to add a key down here to tell it to use a special path for the console assets, because it's not officially an officially released image here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm guessing
those keys that you added in, like those environment variables, I'm guessing are they're documented somewhere that folks can know, hey, well, I need to add these configurations. They're on the Hasura document.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason we're doing this is because this new version that you're testing allows you to use endpoints with URL encoded, like API calls and stuff like that.
Exactly. The live version already supports doing this for application JSON. Stripe likes their X encoded endpoint. I still can't ever actually remember the full format. Is it XWWW form encoded or however it's supposed to be called, URL encoded? So I just don't even try. Encoded. Yeah. So basically, this is just saying, we got some dev mode enabled. We've got now the assets directory. In theory, the image to be back up and running again now. So if I were to go into the Hasura directory here, and now I say, and we can see this, if I were to open up a direct path here to localhost 8080, we have the console running at 8080, but I don't want to use this version here because this will just modify the data I have locally. What I want to do is from inside of the Hasura directory, run the CLI command for Hasura console. What that's going to do is run at a new port 9695. And now every change that I do in here is going to actually persist those changes for any metadata, anything that I'm doing inside of this Hasura directory. And that allows me to check in my changes to Git. I can do diffs with my coworkers. We can be working on different features and be able to merge those together. And that's like the real power here, where you can actually be able to say, we want to have distributed developers working on the same endpoint. And then from the main branch, we can then actually connect that to a Hasura Cloud instance. And we have that. We have CI/CD, so you could actually point the cloud version to your main branch and be able to get a full CI/CD flow.
Nice.
Which is cool. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just verify. So I've got the console now running. This is what I want. And what I need to do is one small step here is I'm going to just grab the Postgres database environment variable here that I will then be able to just paste in as my environment variable, because this is how I persist my my metadata changes. So I need to just add this real quick. So we'll say from an environment variable. And now I've added my database as a source. Now this is an empty database. You could bring in any database you have. And if you bring in a database with existing tables and schemas, here it would actually say, do you want to track these changes? Or do you want to track these tables? And I'd say yes. And then I have a GraphQL API. So that's really cool. We're going to do a little bit of work with that just to kind of view how this GraphQL API comes around from a traditional database. So I'm going to take, in one example here, I'm going to go ahead and just take my existing database. I'll make a table here using the UI. So we'll call this something like a product. And I'll give this a couple of default IDs here. So I'm going to give it like a UI ID. I'll give it a created at column. And then updated that includes a trigger for updating whenever a change is made. Oh, and then we'll give it maybe like a string field here for the name of the product.
And so right now you're using a backend as a Postgres database, but I'm guessing you can support other ones too, right? Like, do you support Mongo or MySQL, SQL Server, et cetera?
We don't have Mongo yet. We have SQL Server, and it's almost at full parity with Postgres because Postgres is just awesome. And
I mean, we all love Postgres, but I remember you said because folks may have different databases, and I want to use Hasura. Is there like another thing? Is there like a compatibility layer or something like that we can go through to make that bridge until you add support, or not at the moment?
So you could use, again, the action transforms if you have like a hosted database, but the best way would be, so we do have the best way is to fork the project and add support.
That'd be ideal.
That would be the very best way. But then the alternative, so again, SQL Server is supported. We could add a database for that right now. If we were to, I can show you, I think, the existing ones that we've got. I'm going to just save this table here real quick. If I were to go into something like, let me just hop into, finish saving here. There we go. If I were to go to add a new database, for example, and we would see the different connectors. So we've got Citus, we've got BigQuery, and beta support, and MS SQL. So those would be the drivers we currently support out of the box. We've got plans for Mongo. We've got plans for other ones as well. We've got support for anything that is a Postgres flavor, timescale, things like that. So all that does work, but we're adding more all the time. So it's part of the vision. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
So we got a simple table here, which it looks like I've gone ahead and given it an uppercase name, which is not the best thing in the world. Let's go ahead and just fix that real quick because a DB admin somewhere is crying now. So I've annoyed the Vim people and I've annoyed the DB admins, so I apologize for that. We could see how we would add something like a category. Let's actually show how we would add this if it was like a SQL statement. I'm going to use some fake data here, and I'm going to just simply create. We got an ID here. We're going to just use a row number. I'm going to just add some dummy data. We could add something here like maybe this will be like a category column or something, or a Let's see if we've got that.
This website is just going to generate stuff like fake stuff, so you don't have to.
Yeah, so let's just see if we got something here that we could kind of throw in there that would be sensible. Let's use a user model. What's that?
Like at the ends on the far right, it says products. Is that?
Let's see what we got here.
Yeah,
that could be good. Well, we could go one step further here. What we can do is using the metadata directory. So that, again, we're tracking all of our metadata, and we can see that we have the on our databases we have our SQL statements should be in our migrations. Here we go. So we should have under this migration here. It's probably the first one I need to do. It's under this migration here. So we have this is our table statement here. So if I take this SQL file here, and I should be able to actually import fields from create table. So if I were to say this is my create table, and I can delete everything below the create table. So in theory, that's basically the product one that I created. So now I've got a direct mapping to my functionality here.
I like that.
Now, UUID, I don't think they have that, but that's an auto-generated field for me, so I can go ahead and delete that. Created app, I can also delete, and I can also delete updated app, but I'm going to generate then for this, we'll generate random product names. So we've got, what do we have here under products it was?
Yes. Like
okay, we're going to do cars, I guess. We'll do produce. I'm kind of hungry. We'll do produce. We got like tomatoes and stuff. All right, and then we got SKUs here. We're going to do they have a random SKU generator?
I don't
like us. We'll do random something with text.
It's like any ID.
Naughty strings. I'm not sure if we're going to go with that one.
Let's not do that. Not on this one. I like
yeah. We're going to go with I don't know. We'll just do a digit sequence.
That makes sense?
Yeah, I think that's probably good. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna stick with this. We're gonna do, I think, maybe just like 50. So we're just gonna have something to look at.
Sure.
And we will do this as a SQL statement, and in return, the table name is going to be public here. Or not public. It's going to be product. Thank you. Yeah. And then we will not include the create table because we already have that. We'll download that data here.
That's cool.
And we can actually just drop this up into the browser here so we can look at it. So we should have the ability to just come right back over into Hasura here. Go into the SQL field. Just paste that in there. And in theory, now it looks like, if I'm guessing here, it does appear like our digit sequence didn't do anything. Let's just see if we can
let's go back and take a look at it.
Patch that real quick. So under Makaru here, digit sequence, do we have to give it something? Is it like okay, so random digit, random lowercase letter. Let's just like grab
you grab that first one, I guess.
Yeah, probably, huh? That's skewish.
Yeah, that's fine.
It looks like a social security number, to be honest.
It kind of does. You say it kind of does.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 2, yeah, 4. Good, very good. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and download that data again, and we'll throw this one up here now and see if we got the data we're looking for. We do, and then we'll head back over to Hasura, the tab here, and we'll just import that data. Okay, we'll go ahead and run that. Very cool. And with that in place, we can now actually see, for example, what we would get with the API then, just from a GraphQL perspective. We could do a simple query here where we would say, then give me like the product, and then we would be able to pull up like the name, the ID, created at fields, and be able to get our data out of our database. which is cool. And then if we added relationships, we can do that. This isn't necessarily a GraphQL talk per se, but we could add another table. We could create a relationship. We can see if we want to do that later on or not. Yeah. But I think the star of the show we were kind of wanting to have a look at was going to be looking at how we would now go ahead and add actions to be able to fetch not just data from my own database, but how would I actually fetch it from my existing system? Because the benefit of GraphQL is I've got this one URL endpoint, right, that I'm able to distribute to all of my developers. I can control the access tokens and everything else and be able to say, like, you're doing a mobile app and you have access to these tables and these fields. I could, with permissions on this data, we can go down very specifically and say, okay, on the, let me fix this here. So if I added like a special role here called user, and on the select field, they only had access to, say, maybe just the SKU or maybe just the name and like the created at. Like, I didn't want to give them more access than that, for example, with that user role. I could get very granular with kind of the permissions that I would be giving somebody. So with the GraphQL, you give them one URL. Each individual consumer gets very scoped permissions, gets access to some data or not to other data. But when I have additional services, right, because Hasura is not a payments company, it's not a CDN, it's not a, I guess it's got some caching, but it's not a storage, it's not a storage utility. We don't have images or anything like that. Our applications need richer content than what we typically have. And so with Hasura, we say, well, how do we bring the benefit of this single API approach into then consuming like GraphQL, like a Stripe or something like Cloudinary or some other utility of that nature. So we're going to try and add a Stripe endpoint. Now, again, like I said, this is bleeding edge.
That's right.
but we're gonna go through. Half of it will be UI driven, and then we're going to have to go into look at the underbelly just a little bit. But it'll be fun. So
yeah, this sounds pretty cool.
We're going to go ahead and add an action here, and this action now allows me to go ahead and define the types that would be both like input types. So what am I actually calling from the API endpoint? And then it allows me to define the actual output types. So what am I getting? And I've got a cool trick to show you for that one as well. And then it allows me to define the actual handlers. And the specific part that becomes really critical for us is being able to actually modify the request transform, because every API requires something special. WWX form and URL encoded, whatever. So every API needs something a little bit different to be conformed with. And so here we could actually be able to add all kinds of different transformation requests, modify the payload extremely custom, and be able to say whatever my specific REST endpoint is wanting, I can actually just go ahead and ping that with this action. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and try to enable the endpoint for Stripe. So just for demos for initially, and then maybe we have time to iterate on that. We'll have a look. But just for a start, we're going to go ahead and use the customers, create a customer object. I'm going to rotate these keys later, so just like, no worries.
Yeah, no worries. But while you do that, I do have a question to ask you.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit familiar with GraphQL. Mm-hmm. So as I'm watching you kind of go through the UI for Hasura, I'm wondering how much of this is like standard GraphQL and how much of this is just like syntactic sugar or some extra niceties that Hasura is adding on for us. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
So that's why GraphQL is so cool, because GraphQL has zero technology implications in the actual specification. GraphQL is a spec. Well, it's in a couple of things. As a spec, it's also an execution engine. But so the way that you query, the idea of having a strongly typed schema and that matching to the query language, and the planner resolver nature where it's able to say, okay, there's relationship here and we can kind of subselect fields. Like, it basically gets as far as to say what the code should do, but it never actually says how you get there. So if you want to create a flat file resolver that does markdown files, which I think would be super cool, if you wanted to do like any of that kind of stuff, that's up to you. However you want to get the data to return, it just has to conform with the shape and the behavior that the GraphQL schema is expecting. And that's partially why it's been so widely adopted. And then that's partially why a lot of people then get as far as like the hello world, and then they start going, oh, I got to write all these resolvers by hand and then maintain them and iterate them. And it's like, well, this isn't like a whole lot nicer like than just having a bunch of loosely typed schema-less endpoints. Yeah. And so the tooling out there, like where we say, okay, well, Postgres has a schema, or these databases have a schema, and we can kind of make some type inferences, and we can understand what it's supposed to be doing with foreign keys and primary keys and things. And then I can just say, well, I also know there's kind of like established best practices for the 99% use case with how we would resolve data in this case. We can actually write reasonable SQL statements that would say, well, we're going to actually just directly conform this request to a SQL statement that just pulls out of the database and resolves the data, and we get free resolvers out of the box. Like, I don't have to write any of that boilerplate code. And then I can say, well, if I have those, if I understand that, if I know how I'm generating this, well, I can also just add other stuff here, like permissions or other behaviors. And yeah, so somebody's complaining that my screen just got blurred. Hopefully my data is is streaming okay. Is it clear on your guys' end, or?
Yeah. So thank you for letting us know, Julian. Jesse, your screen looks fine to me.
Okay.
So Julian, I don't know. Hopefully it gets better for you.
Yeah.
Maybe too, like, we have the recording will be available. So maybe if you watch the recording and change
that might be
your resolution, that can happen sometimes. I know when I'm on YouTube and I click like the little settings button and I could select the resolution. You know what I mean?
Yeah, downscales you for a second. Yeah. And
so that might be what it is. So try and see if you can change those. If it still happens, let us know. We'll try and figure it out.
And if not, I've got lots of videos of the interface.
Exactly.
So we're going to kind of continue here just a little bit. What we got is we're going to say, hey, this is the endpoint we want to hit, right? So we're going to say, in this case, this is the specific one you want to hit. And I know that when I look at this specification that it takes this description field. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead and say that, well, my input here, I'm going to define this as a mutation on the root mutation here. I want to say this is going to be something kind of like create Stripe customer. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to pass in as an input argument to that. In this case, I want to type it out by hand. I could make a type for it, but I'm going to just type it by hand here, which will just be a string that's not actually required. It's just going to be an optional string here. And I'm going to come back to the sample output. Now, I love that Stripe actually lists the shape, the object that I'm expecting to get back, because I think that's just so cool. Because it's really helpful when I'm trying to define types from that. And I have a really cool trick on how this actually we can make this kind of work quicker. I'm going to take the response object that we expect to get back here. I'm going to go to this tool here called transform.tools, which is, if this tool isn't in your developer toolkit already, you should definitely have a look at it. It's got all kinds of stuff, especially for front enders, that just a bunch of things that are really helpful for converters and things, all in a really nice place. But what I'm going to use is the JSON to GraphQL here.
Get out of here. Are you serious?
And when I paste this JSON object in here, it gives me the schema for that JSON object right here in the sidebar. Wow. Now, I don't like this auto-generated main type here. You can see the invoice settings. It gets mapped here to invoice settings. So any kind of relationship that's built in is defined there. Mm-hmm. I'm going to rename this in the next step here to something that's a bit more friendly. And so what I'll do is I'll paste this in here to my types that I'm expecting. And I'll just go ahead and rename this to the Stripe customer object. And I will make that be my return type. And so now I actually have got my typings created here. And so when I'm looking at this here, I'm going to make one more modification here before we have to go into the underbelly. I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to be a post request. And from there, And I could, do query params and all that kind of stuff depending upon what API I was working with. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and say create action. And now to do the funky bit, because it's not yet in this console and it won't work once we made the changes, I'm going to head back over to that metadata directory now, where we're going to have a look at modifying this action we just created, which is going to be this one here. I'm going to hide that sidebar here and hide the console for a minute. So this is the action that we just created, create Stripe customer. And I'll tell you, when I was testing this earlier, I was fighting autocorrect on that, and I have no idea why autocorrect was giving me the options it was giving me, but I'm glad that it was family friendly today. So we're going to go ahead and modify this request now, and I've written it out because it's a bit obtuse. So I'm going to grab it real quick and paste it into here. But we're going to modify this bit of metadata and then actually import that back into the Hasura project. So you can kind of work in both directions. You can say, well, I want to either just write it out by hand as a definition file and share these around. And we have them on our data hub. You can actually copy examples of different tools, Airtable or whatever else, and paste them into a place like this, and then import that metadata. Or you can also just modify something you have if you wanted to do like code mod or all kinds of functionality and not work with the UI. Now, I'm a front ender, so I like UI, but there we are. I'm going to grab the bit of code here that I'm looking for from my other example, and I'm going to just paste it in here. So bear with me for 1/2 second while I modify this one here to version 2.
And so one of the things I'm wondering,
yeah,
like the runtime, right? Like the thing you're running generates these YAML files for us, and so you can go back and forth. You can edit in the UI on the browser, or you can edit here. But I'm guessing as soon as you hit save, does it like auto refresh what's loaded?
It doesn't. I'll need to use the CLI again and to import this, and we'll have a look at that here. So. Okay. Now everybody's got my key, so we definitely have to rotate that. But there we go. So it's the test. It's not even live. So have fun with that.
So I can't charge a bank account and order a bunch of stuff. Is what you're saying?
You could charge Hasura's bank account. No, actually, you can't do that either. It's not enabled. So we've got basically everything that we want, except for I need to add this bit of transformation up here as well. Which is just underneath here. I'm sorry, I'm copying from off page here again. Super interesting television there.
So you're doing this part because these options aren't available in the UI right now, or?
These options are not available in the UI. So like I said, this is the bleeding edge where this again it's supported in our metadata. And so it works from functionality. And the API is not yet final form, so there might be some tweaks here in how this works. That's why I'm not explaining it too much about what's happening here. Yep. Roughly, the concept is we're adding the header, we're adding the content type is the critical piece that's not in the API yet. But so we do that, and then we are able to save this. And while we can't use the UI for this specific one anymore, it'll now work for us from the API, not from the UI, but from the API, which is what we really care about anyways.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to save this here. And now, so I've saved this bit of metadata, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the console for a minute. And I'm going to say Hasura metadata apply. And what it's going to do is it's actually looking for this config file that it sees at the root directory of where my running application is at, which is localhost 8080. If I wanted to be applying metadata to, let's say, a cloud version that I was running somewhere, or a version that I was hosting myself somewhere, so I made changes locally, and I want to apply that metadata migration to a hosted version that I have on what's the one with the whale or the fish? Hosted cloud provider, one of the old schools, droplets. They have droplets.
Does
DigitalOcean, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the one. So if I had it hosted on DigitalOcean, for example, I could say, okay, well, I know the endpoint that I have there, and I could actually put this configuration file there, and I say I apply this metadata to an external tool. I can provide all of these as flags too, so you can have a flow to say, apply to local, apply to remote. You can set up whatever configuration you'd want in terms of using feature flags like schema URL, all that kind of stuff. So the flow here is I use the UI to generate most of the action, and that created this action definition for me in the metadata. So it wrote most of the boilerplate. I went back into there and I had to do some modifications to it to support functionality not yet currently available in the UI. And now I have applied that metadata to my local running Hasura instance, because it's still running from the Docker. It's not the console version. It's running the Docker image is sort of the canonical reference here. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to reboot console now to the metadata tracking one. And so if I just refresh this here, if I just look at actions, we'll see that it exists there. But if I were to click on it, it would go belly up on me. So we can click on it, we can see that it doesn't like it. So we can't use that action anymore from looking at it. But what we can do now in theory is go to our API. And what we've done is we've exposed this mutation. And so we're going to test it here to see if it actually works. And hopefully I haven't missed anything. We're going to go to the mutation here. And I'm going to attempt to say the create Stripe customer. Mm-hmm. I get the description autocomplete here. We'll go ahead and say, please work. And I have a question for you all. Like, why would I use descriptions when I create customers out of curiosity? What are some use cases you actually see for that?
Yeah, generally descriptions can be used for any number of reasons, but generally just to have some information beyond like what their name is and what their email is. I don't use or where you got the customer from. There's a little bit of overlap because we also have metadata, which you would use that for you could use that for a lot of the same reasons you use descriptions, with the benefit of it being somewhat structured as well.
So this is like an escape hatch for people that needed that edge case that you don't support. You just like, well, just
throw it in the description. Yeah.
Put it in the description.
I kind of look at it as like, it's like notes, I guess. You know?
Yeah.
Like if imagine you were building like a CRM, if you wanted to, like that could be like your brief notes, like your summary. Then now the metadata is like key value to me, right? And so like you can have very distinct values, right? Like customer location, key value stores versus descriptions. Now you have like a whole paragraph or a whole context of stuff of, oh, this person did this and we met them here, and you know what I mean? Like here's some information about them that I could read like a sentence versus like, again, key value stores.
Yeah, I guess you could also use it to display stuff. Like if you had a console of just like customers, you might want to put that in description. But again, like I would probably default to metadata, but escape hatch.
Cool. That's cool. So let's test this here now. Because I used that's the full typings, I can actually start to get really choosy about the information that I want to get back. And so I can do something like shipping, or I could do something like the balance here. So I can actually subselect the fields off of that response. And especially if I'm talking about mobile applications or things where I'm trying to save a little bit of data bandwidth on the wire, I'm doing a lot of customer transactions. This becomes actually substantial for a lot of edge cases. So I'm going to test this now, and here we haven't missed anything. And I've got a customer.
That's amazing.
I've got a Stripe create Stripe customer mutation where I haven't actually written any boilerplate code. I've just done some configuration, and I could now add any other URL that I wanted to the actual API. So that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, one API, and I've got Stripe built into the integration with my content.
Yeah, it bridges them together, right? Because you're, like you said, like you have your database, but then now you have a completely other service, and now you've kind of just like stitched it into like the endpoint. You know what I mean? And then just by passing in mutations or whatever. And I'm sure you can do queries too, right? Like you're just doing a mutation here, but I'm sure you can do queries.
In this case, yeah. I mean, let's just go ahead and bridge this out real quick, right? So we could do a query, and let's take another endpoint from Stripe. So what would be a good one to use?
Well,
maybe
since you
listing
just created a
customers.
customer, why don't we do list customers so we can see like the customer you just made?
So what are my required fields here? Do I need to pass
There
a
are
limit
none.
or?
No, you
There
don't
are
need
none.
anything. You can just
like give me all the customers.
yeah.
And the return is that the same, or is that a different shape than the?
It's going to have like data. So it's going to return data, and that's going to be an array of customer objects. So
And it's going to be an array of customer objects. So what we can do is we can actually just take that top level and then tell it that it's going to return an existing type that we're aware of. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you can imagine too, if you had like large amounts of customers, you know what I mean? Like if you notice there's 1, 2, 3, like that third field down says has more. So you could do paging if you wanted to, right? So you could be like, here, give me some customers. And if there's more, I could just page through them as I go on.
And we could support that. Now we're not going to with the time that we have given today, but what we could do is we could actually create our own paging inputs and say, okay, we're going to use those to pass in and be able to create a paging API with our inputs. But let's just go ahead and support this functionality for now. So we're going to head back over to our API, and we'll actually see. Let's get a little bit brazen with this here and see if we can actually just copy pasta this and generate a full one just from the actual definition that we have here. So we've got now, well, that's not off to a good start. So we'll just go back here one. So we've got the two types here, and we'll go ahead and call this get Stripe customers. Or I think the definition was kind of list Stripe customers, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll go ahead and say this is synchronous. It's actually the same endpoint, right?
Yeah, it's just going to be a get.
So we're going to change that to a get. Yeah.
Yep.
We're going to remove the template here. We could pass in limit if we wanted to. We could do that.
Yeah, I think in this case, in this case, I think it would be like a query param. In this case, actually. You might be able to get away with this one in the UI. Oh,
so it's still body. It looks like here.
Yeah, okay. Some of them, occasionally.
Yeah,
they
some of them. Yeah. Some of these ones.
Well, because get right, it can't go in the body because I think
the
way that it works is going to ignore it. I think because when you do a -d with curl and you do a get, curl is going to put it in the query parameter by default.
Yeah.
Mm. So it looks to me like that should be, and I can see where I'm going to have an issue already, and I probably should not have done it this way, and I'll explain why. Because now like where's the query, right? Well, I can show you where it is. It's here underneath the actions GraphQL. So we can see the schema that it generated. So here's the create Stripe customer that we created. Mm-hmm. Now we can go ahead and add an additional one on here. That's going to be the get.
The query.
So again, this is why we have UIs, because this is not the stuff that sparks joy to do by hand typically.
Yeah.
But we're going to go ahead and do this. What did I say? That was a I didn't actually tell it what the input was. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to be an int now. For the limit. And now instead of it being
mutation, because you have it under mutation now, so wouldn't that be different or no?
You're right. See, this is why we have UIs. This stuff does not spark joy to write it by hand. So
I mean, it's fair programming, man. That's what me and Charles are here for.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to get with no params.
Yeah, I guess you can make that parameter optional.
Yeah, and it is optional here because there's no exclamation mark attached to the end there. Now I'm going to try to cheat here just a little bit. So I am going to attempt to utilize the shape again. So I'm going to snag that because I think when I saw this the first time, I thought it was kind of magical. I'm going to just grab that whole thing there and head back over to transform tools and paste that in there. And I have to modify this just a little bit to remove the the unrequired bits here. So we have the top level. We have this top level object here. So this is what we're going to take in as our return type, and then we're going to tell it to use the customer object there, which is the one that we had from before. So we can just take this piece over. We're going to go ahead and say that that this one here is now going to be called the list stripe customers object. And then we're going to just snag the name of that Stripe customer object here. And if I recall correctly, it will complain about the order of invocation here, because they'll say, hey, I don't know what that is if it gets declared before. So we can say at the bottom here, then this is going to be the return type for that query. Now, again, this is really testing things. So we have infinitely increased our surface area for bugs by writing this by hand. But let's go ahead and see how well this actually worked. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the console. And I'm going to go ahead and try to apply this now. So I'm going to go ahead and say Hasura metadata. Also, writing that at midnight for me is not a good idea either. So we're going to go ahead and try that and see what we get.
And so when you do that too, it'll pull in everything, right? Like everything underneath the metadata folder.
So list Stripe customers is right, because I had changed my mind on that one. So it caught the error. So the CLI is doing stuff. It's saying, hey, it's supposed to be called list Stripe customers. There we go. And then we can go ahead and try that again now.
Okay. So
I feel like it's like this, like it's always the big moment. So it went through. So now let's go ahead and actually try booting it up here and see what we get. And we're going to go ahead and we have the console running. It boots it up in a different window on my screen for some reason. So we're going to go ahead and try to query this now. And we'll say list Stripe customers. I need to reboot the refresh 1 second. Let's see if this is list. There we go. List Stripe customers limit. We'll do the 3 here just for kicks, and then we can have a look down here. So we'll grab the data, and then we'll grab just the description of our customer actually, and we can go ahead and run that. And please work. And somebody I created from a previous test there. So you can say.
That's cool. So question for you. I got a bunch of questions.
Yeah. Because let's go to question time, because I think we're running
a little low. So right here, what you're showing. So you see how you have like that data node inside of your results? Could I flatten that? And could I just return the array and not data attached to the thing? Is that possible?
Say it again.
So right now you have a data node, like inside of your results, there's list Stripe customers and there's data, right? Like on the inside, you know what I mean? List Stripe customers data. Is it possible that your top level data could just return the array instead of like, because you have like 2 nested objects and an array at this point. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, right. No, because this is the way that more as a convention now. Most GraphQL APIs, and it might actually be in the specification, but almost all of the schemas will return the like data on a data key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right. I got one for you too.
Yeah.
So right now we're creating a customer. Is there any way to create the customer and then save it to the Postgres database if we wanted to do that, or would that be like 2 separate actions?
So the way that I would do that is, from an architect's perspective, is I would actually use Stripe's webhooks. And I would actually say that when I create the customer, it creates that inside of the Stripe, or it creates a customer in Stripe, and then Stripe basically sends a success back to Hasura to say, it worked, we got it. And then that way you're going to be able to confirm that round trip actually worked. Because if I had like a action that then did send something to Stripe, send something to Hasura. That wouldn't be the right way. Or the way that would ultimately work too would be create it first in Hasura and use an event that would actually go from there. So it's totally async. I'm not waiting for anything. It would just be, okay, create it in Hasura. An event creates it inside of the Stripe interface, and then I get a response back that says, from the webhook again, it says verified or whatever else would be another way to go about it.
Totally makes sense. But this is very much like REST connector. It's like to be able to expose functionality of different APIs that you might be using as GraphQL queries and mutations. Not so much about like saving things to the database. Your normal, mutations and queries, that's what you're going to use that for the most part.
Exactly. And now what we don't have time to go into today, and I don't want to it's always hard when you do dev shows, right? Because half the people their brains kind of melting out of their ears right now, and the other half of the people are kind of like, yeah, but what about? So the thing that we can go into, and you're going to be on my show here soon, I think next week, right?
Yeah, next Tuesday, man.
Next Tuesday, yes. So on that one, and Cecil, if you want to join, you totally can too. That'd be a lot of fun. On that one, we could potentially talk about we could talk about doing the connections, like the relationships from the response. So we could actually drill down the actual response from Stripe's response from the API then has a relationship to my tables, and I can actually then get additional data for a bigger data picture.
That's awesome.
If that makes sense.
That's cool. Yeah, Jesse, this has been really amazing. So I'll be honest with you. I did do a little bit of research about Hasura before, but still, like, I didn't really get it. And I feel now like we've had this conversation, like, okay, cool, I get it. Like, I see how like the pieces come together and the YAML is generated, and how you now I have an API, right, that I could use from any GraphQL compliant client, I'm guessing, right? And we can start doing stuff, which I think is really amazing. Before we cut off, do you have anything that you want to share with folks? Where can we reach out to you? Samples and getting started, and YouTube channels and things of that nature, that folks can learn a little bit more about what your team is doing and how to get started with the product.
Yeah, so number one place to get a hold of me and our team is on Discord. So we have a Discord, whatever it is, /Hasura. So definitely check us out. We also have a weekly data and API show where I have awesome guests on, like Charles, where we talk about all kinds of cool technologies. We also will be having our community call tomorrow. So hopefully there's no clash with your guys' show tomorrow, but we have our community call tomorrow where we actually will be talking about the fact that we just had a pretty cool raise. So we're like kind of in party mode right now. But we're like not party mode, but we're celebrating the raise. And our CEO will be doing an AMA, kind of like where we go on, what's the product going to be doing, kind of stuff. So that'll be fun. And that'll be tomorrow. So everything is on the community page. Check it out at Hasura. And see you in the family.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for watching us. Thank you for being here, Jesse. Hold on for a second while we fade out, and then we're just going to play some funky music for folks. But for the rest of y'all, again, thank you all for being here for Stripe Dev Chats. We'll be back again in another 2 weeks. We're going to have some more awesome guests talking to us about like the cool things that they're building and some of the ways that they could plug into Stripe. But until then, see you next time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
See you.